Oh, we're live.
What's up, everyone?
Welcome to the SPASIGMA live stream that we do. I'm Heidi Priebe. We'll
And I'm Denzel Mensah.
And we're finishing up our 4-part series this week on how to spot each personality type. So we have done NFs, SPs, SJs, and now we are doing NT personality types.
David Keirsey named this temperament the rationals. So the INTJ, INTP, ENTJ, ENTP, although they do not have, they use like together they use all 8 cognitive functions as their primary 4. So like the NTPs do not have any similar functions with the NTJs. But together they make up the rational types because they're still intuitive thinkers, or NTs. And pretty much what this is they perceive the world through their intuition primarily, whether it be introverted intuition or extroverted intuition, and then they use their decision making process is a thinking process, whether it be extroverted thinking or introverted thinking. So in a way, kind of like with the NFs, where they perceive the world with their intuition and they decide based on like their morals, their ethics, whatever the case may be. NTs take the same intuition in, but then they make their decisions in a more rational, logical manner.
I find INTP to be a little bit of a tough one, to be honest. I think INTPs, ISTPs, ISTJs, and INTJs are all very easy to confuse for each other. Because they all have that very rational kind of, not detached in a negative way, but you can tell that their reasoning isn't an incredibly personal one. They're not necessarily warm in in the way that they come across initially. Not that they're unkind or cruel, which is kind of a stereotype about NTs, but they just, they don't have that warmth, that initial engagement, the same way like people who share a preference for F do. To any of the introverted thinkers, you really have to get into a conversation with them to tell which preferences they have besides introversion and thinking. Because with the INTP, they might present very similarly to the ISTP in that they definitely have like a more chill demeanor to them than either an INTJ or an ISTJ. Like they're a little bit more laid back, a little bit more go with the flow. They might have, the way they speak is quite different. Like when you get like an ISTJ or an INTJ, they have a very deliberate way of speaking because they're using their TEs. They're trying to like concisely convey a specific point. Whereas the INTP has a more explorative kind of way of speaking.
Yeah, that's very
So they kind of will explore ideas as they're talking to you. So if you get them talking about a topic that they enjoy or that they're interested in, you can tell that the way their speech is coming out, they're kind of thinking of a new idea and they'll follow that for a bit. They're thinking of another idea and they'll follow that for a bit, because I think Elon Musk is a TI user. And the reason I think that is because when he speaks, and this is very classic of TI users, he corrects himself a lot for accuracy. So whereas INTJs or TE users in general, they'll have like usually sourced specific pieces of information before they speak, so they kind of have that ready to go. Whereas with TI users, they're always kind of like they'll be talking, they'll kind of say something and then think, wait, is there a more accurate way to describe that or to explain that thing, or was that even the most accurate thing to say? So they're more likely to backtrack and go like, it's like this, but actually it's like this, perhaps like this. And you'll get a lot of that. Like they'll correct themselves for accuracy a lot, and they're not necessarily worried about appearing to be not that they definitely want to appear competent for sure, but they're more invested in making sure that they're getting across accurate information than conveying it in a way that's going to like move people, I guess.
Yeah.
So they're more likely to be kind of unapologetic about correcting themselves as they speak. And I think that's a really big giveaway of TI. So there's that. And then when you get that kind of explorative, like inventive, kind of off the walls idea generation, that's where you know that they're backing it up with NE as opposed to SE, which is more likely to back things up with like concrete data and facts. The any user is more likely to, they will have specific facts, specific pieces of information that they're presenting as they go, but then they can also kind of like get launched off into fantasy land.
Yeah.
Have these wild ideas, and they enjoy going down those kind of imaginative routes.
So I've been doing the compounds for all the types, and compounds for all the MBTI types. And the one that I've done for the INTP was the awkward nature of an ISFJ with the wit of an ENTP. And pretty much what I mean by that is the INTPs that generally speaking, the INTPs that I've come to like associate with, including my roommate and everything, because FE is like their last function, then I've realized that sometimes they can seem like, I pretty much state as like kind of like robotic, as in like they're logically processing like, oh, this is the way to interact with people. Like this is the time where I'm supposed to use manners. This is when I'm supposed to do this. This is when I'm supposed to do that. And it's not always as fluid. Now I'm sure like this isn't the thing with every INTP, but this is just a pattern that I've seen in my life, like consistently with like probably 90% of INTPs that I know. And they laugh about it, like when I point it out to them, especially being an FE dominant. But just like you said with the TI, like how they like correct themselves, I have TI as my inferior function. And even then, I still catch myself doing it. And then there's also times where I'm just like, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? But INTPs, I feel like I rarely hear them say, you get what I mean.
Yeah.
They are so precise.
They're very precise.
They're the types that they will go, their speech is inconsistent, as in they can talk very, very slow as they're trying to like really get the right words. And then as soon as NE takes over, their auxiliary function, then they'll start going really fast. Because as soon as they caught it, then they're like, and they just start saying a lot. And then they hit a snag, and then they're going like really slow again. And so, yeah, I think that's one way to like really catch an INTP, like just like you said, like when they are correcting themselves and they debate their own opinions.
One of my good friends who's an INTP, his FE is so well developed that I thought he was an INFJ when I first met him, because it was the first thing that kind of came out, because, you know, he's using FE to socially interact. Mm-hmm. So there can be a lot to be said for the fact that NTs in general tend to be very big on personal development and self-improvement. So a lot of the time you might see them like see if they have like either FE or FIs in inferior function, they might take deliberate steps to try to engage and develop that, because they're so big on personal development and they see the utility in developing their feeling preferences, because they understand logically that you need to have people skills to get by in the world. So the kind of flip side of that, and this goes for any of the NT types, is that they might actually make a personal point to develop their F functions if they see them as holding them back in any way.
And I think the last note that I'll make about INTP is that since their judging function is dominant, then they use NE to complete a task, as opposed to segue into like an ENTP, where Michael Pierce, when he was distinguishing the two, he said something along the lines, and Michael Pierce on YouTube, I mean, he said something along the lines of the ENTP will want to go to explore the mountains, just to pretty much explore the mountains, while the INTP is like, I have a set goal in mind to go and explore the mountains. So just like I said, like segueing into the ENTP, how would you say that you recognize them?
ENTPs are really interesting because, I mean, I share a dominant cognitive function with ENTPs, but we're quite different. So I think, but I think there can be confusion between ENFPs and ENTPs, so that's kind of a cool thing to explore too. The first thing that pops out to me about ENTPs is just that constant like idea generation. Like my one close friend is an ENTP. Literally like without fail, every 6 months, if you check in with him, he has like he's like a serial entrepreneur. Like every 6 months, it's like a new project, a new development, a new thing he's like all excited and worked up about, and he's thrilled. And but then, you know, what differs between that and the ENFP is the ENFP has more of like a personal approach to everything, whereas the ENTP, when they're looking to back up like what they're going to do, they go for the logic, they go for the data, they go for like, well, it makes sense because of this, and we'll logically organize it in this way, as opposed to trying to like sell their idea to others in a fit of like creative inspiration. But they actually are quite good ENTPs at persuading people, like that tertiary almost like more, I would say, actually, I would say more so than the ENFP, because the ENFP so needs to be authentic, whereas the ENTP is like, they're kind of like looking at it like I'm conveying objective facts to you in an attractive way. So they're trying to sell you on an idea by kind of convincing you that it's something you need, where the ENFP would never do that. Like, we're like, this is something that's wonderful, take it if you want it, leave it if you don't. The ENTP is like, no, you need this like brilliant new thing that I'm developing. And they make you think they do. They're so persuasive.
So the compound that I put for the ENTP was the cool edge of an ESTP with the nerdiness of an INTP.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of like, it really is like a mix, because like ENTPs, the first thing that comes to mind, honestly, is I don't know if you've seen Zootopia, Heidi, but I believe that Nick Wilde, the fox on that movie, was an ENTP, and then Judy Hopps was ENFJ, which was like interesting to watch their dynamic throughout the movie. But he was like, just like you were saying, like he actually was like charming, but like he used his function so well. Like he was able to really be like an entrepreneur with the scams that he would pretty much like do, and they come with this confidence pretty much. Like I've said that something that I've noticed, and I don't use like body language to definitively type people, but just something that I've noticed, and I guess you got like all you guys watching, y'all can check it out as well. They always seem to have this like sly look, like their eyebrow. They have the face. If you look up Nick Wilde on Zootopia, they usually have that smirk face. Like it comes with like confidence, like how an ESTP would, but they have the nerdy nature of an INTP, as I stated, where they explore all these different ideas and these different concepts. And they really do have, like, when they have a grip on their FE, their tertiary FE, they really can like talk you into just about anything. And they're called the debater, and they, like the ones that I know, they legit just love to debate for absolutely fun.
You know what's funny is I think I'm going to take an opposite approach to that, coming from an any dominant standpoint, because
Sure.
what's funny is, to me, I don't see ENTPs as big debaters, even though that's their stereotype. Like I've always kind of thought in my head, like, that doesn't seem to fit for me. I don't really see them as I mean, I only know maybe two or three. I've only ever met maybe two or three NTPs. They're very, very rare. They're not at all a common personality type. But the ones I know, I was like, I have never seen them as that kind of like aggressive debater. But then I thought about it and I was like, sometimes I will get feedback from people in my life that I debate too much. And I'm like, I think it's just because I'm using any, but I don't see it as debating. And I think therefore I don't see it in other any dominant types as debating, but it might seem that way to others.
Yeah.
I think the way that any works is it automatically kind of goes to like, if something's being presented as like a hard and fact, like rule or piece of information, it automatically goes to questioning it, because that's how we learn. Like we learn by being like, well, what if you put it in this situation? Well, what if it, but that doesn't work here. Well, what if it, like, what if it were in this situation? Like, how would that play out? But it's funny because I think people think that any dominant types go into things being like, I'm going to be like I'm going to go like mess up mess up the piece and like, you know, eat everything just for fun. But I actually think a lot of the time, definitely with ENTPs, definitely with myself, and probably for ENTPs, they're literally just questioning it to try to understand it better. So what's interesting is, like, I feel like the ENTP always gets the name the debater, but I don't know if the ENTPs I know would self-identify as debaters. But I think that's just kind of like how a lot of the time any doesn't realize it's coming across to others. Because just questioning things and trying to find, it's almost like, okay, when someone presents something, you're looking for how it would fit across a wide range of situations. So if you're saying like, oh, but what about this situation? But what about this situation? It might seem like we're trying to challenge their logic, but in reality, we're just trying to understand where it fits and where it doesn't, because that's how our learning style works. So yeah, I think it's just interesting that Any always kind of gets up like debatey stereotype, but I think that's really just a learning style that any dominant types might not realize is coming across as in such a kind of not necessarily combative way, um, but challenging way, I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that how we said the INTP, they like debate themselves and they're like, oh, am I even right? Am I this? I think the ENTP can go like the opposite direction where it's like in there trying to understand, they will question your logic rather than questioning their own logic. Not that they don't ever question their own logic, but they probably have more confidence in questioning the other person's logic so they can try and understand because NE is their dominant function.
Yeah.
So I think that's what like might also be a distinguishing like thing between the two. Like, are you more like critical of other people's, is that the right way to put it? Or like, are you do you question other people's logic uprightly more often than you question your own? Um, this is one of those moments where I'm saying you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. Well, I feel like NE as a dominant function, or maybe probably also as an auxiliary function, it's just very quick to question everything, like
Hmm.
everything. So that's, I think, a big tip off of an NE user is kind of, I don't say critical in the sense of not critical in the way of being like there's a one right way that things should
Yeah.
be. Almost critical in the opposite direction of like anytime someone says there's a one right way, they're like, no, 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 no. There's a thousand ways.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
they're very quick to reject like anytime you say that there's a certain way or a specific way
This is
that
one thing.
that should apply across a broad range of scenarios, especially when they have TI, because TI is so specific. So it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I see this thing. A, it doesn't apply in all these scenarios. B, here's the very specific scenarios it does. So TI is very contextual, and NE is um, very prone to like like its first method of analysis is critically analyzing an idea to see if it fits across a wide range of scenarios. So like, yeah, you definitely get a lot of like for INTPs and ENTPs, it takes a lot for them to kind of agree with something. Like they're
Yeah.
always kind of gonna be looking at, I agree with it only in this particular context. Like any sweeping statements are not gonna fly usually with NTPs.
Just to contrast with TE users such as the ENTJ and INTJ, where TE is more of the type that like tries to find a glove that fits all. And so, like you were saying, like with the INTP and ENTP, they might be like, okay, well, this applies here, but I don't see this applying like here, here, here.
Mm.
While, and they may like debate with TJs who use TE, like, okay, no, this is how we're gonna like apply this system to everything or to everyone. And I think that's where like sometimes the NTPs and the NTJs can like disagree in certain areas. So I guess we can segue that into the ENTJ since we're talking about TE and they have that as a dominant function.
Yeah, I mean, I would say as a TE user, I would say it's not necessarily that TE is trying to find one piece of logic that fits all scenarios, because I think TE users are very aware that you can't make these sweeping generalizations, especially when you have NI, because NI gets so into the like nitty gritty of what works in which situations and what doesn't work in other situations. But I think definitely they're less interested in the nuances of of like the logic involved, and they're more interested in the utility.
The
So
results
it's
are
kind of like
interesting.
FEFI. Like FI enjoys kind of exploring emotional experiences, whereas FE enjoys kind of like maintaining harmony. It's
Mm,
like TI enjoys exploring the logic of figuring out like what's accurate, what's not, and then TE is like, you know what? I know there's a lot there under the surface. I know that there's a lot to explore, but what I'm concerned with is which logical decision is going to make the biggest impact.
mm,
So I think it's not even necessarily that they're trying to put things under a logical umbrella. I think they always are aware of the fact that things are more nuanced than maybe they're making them out to be, but it's more that the nuances don't always matter. They're looking at, I have this goal or I have this thing I want to accomplish. What's going to take me there? And everything else I don't necessarily need to explore right now. It's not important.
just like you said, like they are aware of the nuances, but the energy, the most effective thing to do in certain scenarios is to ignore those nuances and like just do what's most effective. And I think that ENTJs are really good at doing that because they always think of okay, what is the most effective or efficient way to bring, like, the efficient way to tackle this task.
Hmm.
And they, TE users are very like results oriented, so they don't really care too much about like the process. So like I think about uh, like I watched Blacklist and I think about Harold Cooper. Every time when they're explaining like this is the case and all of that in the police department, then he's pretty much like, okay, so what does this mean? Like, all right, now that I know what this
Yeah,
means, get there, do
yeah,
this.
yeah.
Like, so they're not really here to like hear like, oh, well, you know, this, that. Like this ISFJ on the show will always try and like explain things like, so this is what this means and this, and then he's like, okay, but what is the final verdict? Great. Now that we have this information,
Now we
do
can work
this,
with
do
it.
that, do that. Yeah. So
Yes.
that's how I see TE as opposed to like TI. Like TI, like you said, and FI, they're more process oriented, and then FET are more like results oriented.
Yes, results oriented is exactly it. I think that's really the difference between TI and TE.
Mm.
And I also notice this a lot kind of when I find TI users are they tend to be very political a lot of the time, and they have a lot of like opinions about how government should work, but then a lot of the time they'll get frustrated with their own opinions because they'll be like, well, that could not ever be implemented because people just wouldn't do it, or it just wouldn't work, or you could never get people to go for it. And I think that's really interesting because, um, there's just so much nuance in TI, but then with TE, it gets results. I made one ENTJ friend in the past year, and it's the second ENTJ I've ever met in my life. So I'm so happy because I'm like, now I have an ENTJ friend to help me understand how ENTJs work. And
Mm.
something I found interesting that he said that I really agreed with as a tertiary TE user was he was like, you can find facts or logic to support anything you want to say. So he's like, you have to be very careful and very critical when you're listening to people speaking because, and this is something I've always agreed with, especially as an NE user, because people just source facts that support their opinions. But I'm like, that's a
Mm.
very TE way to look at it because I think TI users don't just source facts that support their opinions.
Yeah,
I'm not
I
saying
agree.
that's what all TE users do, that they're not using good logic or whatever. Um, but I definitely think that they're more aware of the fact that logic can be kind of manipulated because they see the route to doing that.
Hmm.
Um, because TE kind of takes a like top down approach as opposed to like a bottom up approach. I don't know if I'm saying that right. But like TE kind of looks at like what do I want to make happen, and then it like reaches down and kind of sources the things that will help it make that thing happen. Whereas TI
Yeah.
is kind of like what's here, let's root through it, and then once we arrive at the solution, the best solution will make that happen.
Yeah.
Whereas, yeah, TE kind of has the idea, the goal, the external accomplishment that it wants first. And then it's really good at pulling in resources from wherever it can find them that are going to make that thing happen in the most optimal way. That's like a big tell for ENTJs is they're all about like optimization. They will kind of like find any goal and they're very goal oriented people. Like,
Yeah.
incredibly so. Any goal, any challenge, any personal thing they want to develop, and they will just figure out how to make it happen and make it happen in the best possible way. Because then they turn to NI to kind of optimize that vision,
Hmm.
as opposed to like an ESTJ might turn to like the more traditional option or the more socially acceptable option. The ENTJ will really like get down to the nitty gritty of like, is this the best of all possible ways to make this happen?
Yeah. The compound that I put for them was the cold nature and style of an ESTP with the vision of an INTJ.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much like ENTJs, I've learned actually this year, they're not all like really like aggressive and mean, like especially
No, 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 no.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
I had a I don't know, a precognitive whatever of a preconceived like notion, like they just naturally present themselves that way. Maybe it's because I'm an FE dominant, but
great.
I've met quite a couple of ENTJs who, like, especially like Johannes from Twitter, we talk a lot, and it's like, oh, he's taught me a lot and everything. And he is very understanding, and he does like take the time to like, explain things in a like manner that I would understand and everything as well. But yeah, I've realized, just like you were saying, in my NT's low key sub video, which is pretty much a video like giving constructive criticism to all the personality types in a humorous way, I said that NTJs can be liable to confirmation bias, which is pretty much
Mm,
if they believe something, they
mm,
can find whatever facts needed to push that, whether it be subconsciously, as in they do not know that that's what they're doing, or intentionally, like, oh, well, I'm going to be right at all costs. And this doesn't mean that all NTJs do that, especially if you're healthy, but I'm just saying that it could be something that they don't even notice that they're doing in that sense. And so that goes in line with like what you were saying about, the NTJs, like the one that said that, like you can find facts to back up everything that you're saying or that you're arguing. But one thing that I've seen with ENTJs is, like you said, they are the best probably with follow through. So if you have like an ENTJ mentor or coach, or if you are an ENTJ who like is aiming for something, and if you're aiming for something in particular and you have like an ENTJ in your life, they're probably like the best to be able to help you to get to where you need to go. And they also come off a lot of times as introverts. So a lot of ENTJs believe they're INTJs because TE does not necessarily have to do with people, but it just has to do with the external world. So a lot of ENTJs, I've literally had to like talk to them like, no, you're not an INTJ just because people drain you. What actually drains you is people getting in the way of you getting things done. But that doesn't mean that you're not an extrovert. Your focus is on the external world of getting things done, which makes you an extrovert. And you just use an I as a supplement to be able to help you carry out this task.
Yes.
And then for the INTJ, thank you. And then for the INTJ, the compound I put was the passionate care of an ISFP with the practical follow through of an ENTJ. And this is because Michael Pierce said that the INTJs are probably what we would call the actual visionary, because they have this internal mindset of what they want to accomplish. And they spend so much time like refining it and holding on to it, as opposed to maybe even the INFJ or ENFJ, who may like shift their vision a little bit to meet the people's needs. The INTJ is like, no, I know this will work. And this is where confirmation bias can come in handy oftentimes, because like no matter what society is telling you, I know this is going to work. I'm going to make this work. And they carry out their vision in that way. So the INTJ is more of the type to like sit down and really like lay out their blueprint for years before they finally carry it out. And they also, from my experience, I've seen they have like a very good nature, like a very good relationship with their tertiary FI.
They're very considerate. Like they're very considerate about making sure that they're like holding space for people, that they're like allowing everyone to express what they need to express. I think that INTJs and ENTJs I know just because, and I'm not saying other types aren't like this, but just because they get this contrary stereotype, they are incredibly emotionally aware and they often take very deliberate steps to become very emotionally intelligent and to learn to use their FI in a constructive way to like help them towards their goals and to help them to relate to people better. And I find the INTJs and ENTJs I know in my life, they value their relationships with people very, very highly. And they put very deliberate effort into making sure that they're understanding the people in their lives, that they're communicating with them in a way that's like conducive to the way the other person wants to be communicated with. So I think that those types are really underrated in terms of their emotional intelligence. And I agree. There are all these very strange stereotypes on the internet about like INTJs and ENTJs being robots and they hate people and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe it's every single INTJ and ENTJ I've ever met has been the exception. I don't find that to be true at all. Like I find that to be very far from the truth. Especially because they're using TE, and TE understands that to get to where you want to go in life, you need to have people skills. And you need to be able to communicate with people effectively. And I think most NTJs take very, very deliberate steps to improve their ability to relate to people. So I think if you're looking for like these cold robots, that's not how you spot an NTJ.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
All right. Well, we will, we wish you guys a happy holidays if you're celebrating anything. And we will let you know next week what topic we're going to tackle to end the year off.
For sure. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And leave your comments. We'll be answering them throughout the week and stuff. Ciao.
Okay, bye guys.
I'm David Bowder, CEO of SPASIGMA. Every day, each of us is surrounded by a great diversity of people, and indeed, personalities. Some people we find it very easy to relate to. Others, not so much so. Our program exists to help you make sense of your own personality, as well as the diverse personalities around you, to help you improve both your personal and professional lives. Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." We'll teach you to understand how to reach the diverse personalities around you, to communicate with them in a way that integrates who you are with who they are. So enough talk about all this. Welcome to SPASIGMA's Personality Quotient PQ program. Enjoy the journey.